hello. Thank you all. You all are at what I'm going to call the period of max idealism. Raise your hands if you're between 20 and 25. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Plus, you're all here. You took your own time and money to come here, meet each other, and convene to see if there's something you can do to improve the world. Now, this deck is not meant for you all. This deck is a deck I use to scare corporate types. So I'm going to use it on you, and then we're going to talk about how to make things better. I'm going to do something highly unusual, which is I'm going to try and drag in some of you to participate, despite the fact that there are about 1,000 of you here. So we'll see how it goes. So this is a little bit about me. How many of you have heard of Venture for America? Excellent. If you haven't, there's a documentary on Netflix right now called Generation Startup with an Oscar-winning director. I make cameos as myself. I have an IMDb credit as the magical Asian man who makes good things happen for young people. So I started Venture for America in 2011. I was the head of an education company called Manhattan Prep. How many of you have heard of Manhattan Prep? Yeah. How many of you, raise your hand if you're like an MBA student, because then you would have. Yeah, because we're #1 in the US in GMAT Prep, so some of you might have used us. So I ran that company until 2011. We were acquired by the Washington Post in 2009, and I saw that so many smart, young, ambitious people were doing jobs they did not like that were not helping society in any meaningful way. And so I said, well, that is terrible. So whoa, it's like a thunderclap from God. That was terrible. And so I started Venture for America. I donated $120,000 of my own to seed the organization, and I started calling rich friends and asking them, do you love America? And then the savvy among them said, what does it mean if I say yes? And then I said, at least $10,000. And then about 12 of them said, I love America for $10,000. Like I thought you did. So we had a budget around $250,000. That first year, our budget grew and grew to about $6 million, thousands of applicants, hundreds of entrepreneurs. We created about 3,000 jobs now across the country in 18 cities. I got a medal. I actually didn't get a physical medal. He did not give me a medal, but I met President Obama several times. I'll tell you guys a story. I got to bring someone to the White House with me, along with some other awardees, and I was the only one who brought my wife. And I was like, what the heck is up with that? Like, how do you all stay married? So I received a number of awards, and then I started to sense that the work we were doing with Venture for America might not be enough, because technology is changing our economy in very, very fundamental ways. So here's the interactive portion. It's going to be fun and tricky. First, what proportion of Americans graduate from college? 20, 30, other guesses? They're essentially right, it's 32%, so it's about a third. Now, what are the most common jobs in the US? Like, what do people actually do for a living? And so the hint is that they probably did not graduate from college, because 68% or so are high school graduates or 1 year of college, essentially. So go ahead and shout it out. What are the most common jobs in the United States? Driving is #4, that's right. Truck driving is the most common job in 29 states. There are 3.5 million truck drivers, average age 49. Someone else shouted something else? Retail, that's right, that's #2. Most common job, second most common job in the US. The average retail worker is a 39-year-old woman who makes about $12 an hour. Again, high school graduate. So that's #2 and #4. Food service and food prep. Hey man, good to see you. What's up, brother? So one thing that happens is if you become a senior do-gooder like me, then you just hang out with the rest of us in little green rooms. You see each other over and over again. Anyway, so please do grow those green rooms so we can see some new people. That would be grand. So #3 is food service and food prep. And then #1, tricky, people struggle with it, administrative and clerical, including call centers. And then #5 is manufacturing. So what do those 5 jobs have in common? Again, clerical, retail, food service, truck driving and transportation, and manufacturing. They can all be automated. Someone has read my clippings. It is true. So here are some animations that are familiar to all of us. This second one I resent mightily because I'm really bad at it. I always get there and fumble. I'm like, oh, and then like it takes me an extra 30 seconds. Easy. This one might be new to you all. This is the pizza printer. So there are pizzerias that have no humans involved, where you call them and then they just make the pizza and then self-drive it on over to you. That's actually being piloted right here in Arizona. If you order from Domino's here in Arizona, there might not be a driver. It just kind of drives on over. You can look that stuff online, it's fun. And then the self-driving truck, which you're all familiar with. And then this is manufacturing. So I'm going to talk about manufacturing at some length because in my mind, the reason why Donald Trump is our president today is because of what we did to manufacturing workers, which is that we got rid of about 4 million manufacturing jobs after 2000. And so these jobs were centered in what states? Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, all blue states that went to red in the last election. Notice a trend, same thing in Iowa, same thing in Missouri. The reason why those states went red is that we blasted away 4 million manufacturing jobs in those communities. Now, how many of you studied economics? I did too. So what would your economics professor or textbook say would happen to 4 million manufacturing workers who lost their jobs? Retrained, that's right, that's what my textbook said too. They would move, they would get reskilled, they would find higher productivity, employment, the economy would grow, comparative advantage, all is well, right? Is that right? Yes. So what really happened to the manufacturing workers? Well, most of them left the workforce. You can see around 2000 when we got rid of manufacturing workers, the labor force participation rate in this country plummeted, where now it is down to 62.9%, the same levels as El Salvador and the Dominican Republic. Almost 1 in 5 prime working age American men has not worked in the last 12 months, and they're not dealing with idleness well. It turns out that men and women deal with idleness in different ways. Women, you deal with idleness just fine. You actually like just do something positive, like adapt, like everything is fine. Men, we do not deal with idleness well. What do we do? Any man want to shout it out if you want to confess what's in your soul? We drink, we play a lot of video games, we volunteer less than employed men do, and then we head towards various other antisocial and self-destructive behaviors, get very down on ourselves, and things go poorly. So what happens here is that you see, this is millions of unskilled men leaving the workforce between 2000 and 2015. And then what they did is they filed for disability, which is the black line. So at this point, there are more Americans on disability than work in construction. By the facts, about half of the men that left the workforce in Michigan and Indiana and these other Midwestern states filed for disability. And when you file for disability, you go home, you get angry, you get distressed, you drink a lot, and you start to kill yourself, which is also what started to happen around 2000, where you see the American suicide rate starts to spike relative to other developed countries. And if you look at that graph, I mean, I don't know how many of you are horrified by that, but that's clearly not like the others, right? I mean, that's a complete aberration. So this is all the stuff that started hitting me while I was out there creating thousands of jobs in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Alabama, Louisiana. Again, I'm a senior do-gooder. So I'm now a parent, and this one upset me, and there are many, many reasons for this, so it's not simplistic because culture has changed and patterns have changed and many people are having children in different ways. But I found this jarring, which is that about 40% of American children are now born to an unmarried mother. And if you're a single parent in this country, about 90% of the time that means you're a single mother. About 10% single dad, 90% single mom. So this is what we're doing here in America, and mental health, and for as young people, you know there's a crisis in terms of anxiety and depression among college students and I'm sure graduate school students. And this is ripping apart homes, families, communities around the country. This is the list of outrages that Anthony was talking about, just laid out in black and white, or in this case, on some colored graphs. So this is all the stuff that I was absorbing right after Donald Trump got elected, because I'm very, very data-driven, and I would submit to you all that the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes numbers. Thank you. So the reason I care so deeply about this, this is my family. I've got 2 young boys, one of whom has special needs, and they are not very rugged little boys. They're not going to do well in a country that is not doing well, in a country that's torn apart by trucker riots in 5 to 10 years, by the fact that 30% of malls are gonna close in the next 4 years. And why are 30% of malls gonna close? Amazon. Amazon gets another $20 billion a year in e-commerce, and so main streets around the country are closing. 10% of American workers work in retail. What is the next move for them going to be? 57% of Americans cannot pay an unexpected $500 bill. So it's not like these people have a ton of savings to be able to relocate or retrain or reskill. All of the fantasies that we present. I dug into the numbers. Again, I wrote a book about this stuff called The War on Normal People. What do you all think the effectiveness rate is of government-funded retraining programs? 15, 10, 7. Those are all just about right. The range is 0 to 15%. And no one ever guesses a really high number. No one's ever like, the government would be great at that. They're really not. Fewer than 10% of American workers qualify, and you're looking at effectiveness rates between 0 and 15%. So at this point, it's 2017. I'm having a bit of like a crisis where I'm like, I've spent 6 years of my life helping train an army of young entrepreneurs, not that dissimilar from you all, to create 3,000 jobs around the country. And we are pouring water into a bathtub that has a giant hole ripped in the bottom. And Donald Trump is our president because our country is unable to honestly acknowledge the fact that our economy is changing in fundamental ways. And it is setting you all up. I started off saying you all are at maximum idealism. Like, you're gonna go out there and you're going to see just how unfair this economy is that we have left you with. It's criminal. It's deeply, deeply immoral. And like Anthony said, it is an outrage. So my goal now is to change the rules of the game so that we can all win. That is the only way for us to make an opportunity out of this mounting, multi-layered crisis. It's unfortunate, but Anthony's nodding because he knows what I'm talking about. So I'm now running for president as a Democrat, and I've got 3 big platform proposals. You might have heard of at least one of them, and that's universal basic income. Raise your hand if you know what universal basic income is. Someone shout out what universal basic income is that had their hand up. That is my plan, that's right. I have rechristened my plan the freedom dividend because it tests better with the word freedom in it. And the freedom dividend is that every adult gets $1,000 a month, free and clear, no questions asked. Now, how many of you, raise your hand if you think that sounds great, but will never happen. Too good to be true. All right, so keep your hand up for a second. So what would you say if I were to tell you that this proposal passed the House of Representatives in 1971 under Richard Nixon, and that Martin Luther King was for it, Milton Friedman was for it, and 1,000 economists signed a letter saying it would be great for the economy and society? So keep your hand up if you still think it's too good to be true. Maybe some of you will put your hand down. And now, what if I were to tell you that one state has had a reality since 1982 where everyone in that state gets now between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked? And what state is that? And how do they fund it? And what is the oil of the 21st century? Data, technology, artificial intelligence, self-driving cars and trucks. Can we fund a technology dividend for every American, and would that be enough to pay for $1,000 a month for all of you, all of us? Yes, yeah, the math works out. It's kind of unbelievable. So plan number 1 is the freedom dividend. And imagine what would happen in organizations and families and communities around the country if everyone got $1,000 a month at age 18 until they're 64 and then Social Security kicks in. Just reflect for a moment what that would mean. First, where would that money go if 57% of Americans right now can't pay a $500 bill? What are they going to spend $1,000 a month on? Rent. Debt. Student loans, car repairs, the occasional night out, supplies for their kids. It would grow the economy by about 12%, create 4 million new jobs in Main Street economies because the garage that needs to hire a new mechanic, the restaurant needs to hire another worker, and you can't exploit workers if everyone's getting at least enough so you can live a minimal existence. It compensates women for all of the work that's done that right now the market does not recognize. It helps elevate communities of color. It improves graduation rates. It improves mental health. It decreases domestic violence. It decreases stress levels. It decreases hospital visits. This is the closest thing we can muster to a fix to address some of these monumental problems that are coming down the pike. And I would submit to you what a rapper in Atlanta said in response to my campaign. And what he said was, I don't know who Andrew Yang is, but he wants to give me $1,000 a month. So there is no reason in a democracy that we cannot come together and vote ourselves a dividend. No reason at all. Does not require any constitutional supermajority. It just requires 51% of Congress. And when I'm president in January 2021 and there's a blue wave, if the Asian man who wants to give everyone money becomes president, what's the first thing I'm gonna do? Cut those checks, that's right. I'm gonna go to Congress, I'm gonna say, hey guys, you know how I won, right? Let's do it. Let's pilot it in Rhode Island. I've always had a soft spot for Rhode Island because I went to college there. So number one, freedom dividend, universal basic income. Number two, we need to get healthcare off the backs of you all. You're a little too young to worry about this yet because you're all under Obamacare and your parents' plans and you're like, it's fine. But it gets much, much less fine in a minute. When you come out, and I've started companies, healthcare is the worst. It is the worst for you all, it's the worst for companies. 94% of the new jobs created since 2005 have been temp, gig, and contractor jobs, so they would avoid paying for healthcare. I mean, that's the new normal in this country, so we need to get healthcare off the backs of both families and businesses, and so I'm going to push for a single-payer Medicare for all system. And the third thing is the most interesting maybe to you all, and this is what I'm talking about by changing the rules of the game. So right now, how many of you saw a book called Winners Take All by a guy named Anand Giridharadas? Anyone? The title says it's a really good book. It's worth, he's a friend of mine. Again, the do-gooders hang out with each other. So he wrote a book about how the problem that you're all seeing, and it's hard to talk about, is that the most admirable people in our society are people who won in the system and then come back and then sprinkle some of the largesse and say, hey, I can make other people a bit more like me. I mean, that's what I resemble. That's what all of the philanthropists resemble. They come and say, like, hey, we can help make it a little bit better for people who have not won like we have. And then we hold them up on a pedestal as paragons of virtue, and then people say, oh, we need to become more like those people. But those people will not fundamentally change anything because they are the people that have ridden the wave up. I'm friends with many of these people. I'm now galvanizing them and saying, look, we need to change the rules of the game so that the economy revolves around people and not capital efficiency. So this is a picture of my family. Still up? No. Oh, there it's back. Thank you. Thank you, AV person. So my wife is at home with our young boys right now. And what is her contribution to GDP according to the numbers? 0. And we all know that's utter nonsense. I can attest to the fact she works much, much harder than I do, even though I'm running for president. And so we need to change the rules of the economy so that it rewards human behaviors that we know we need more of. So you're all a brilliant group of activists who want to change the world. How would you measure the economy if it were up to you? Social impact, love it. Mental health, happiness, contentment, levels of engagement with work. What proportion of Americans do you all think like their jobs? It's a little higher than that, happily, but it is not high enough, I gotta tell you. So this is what I'm talking about by changing the rules of the game. If you make those the measurements of the economy, then if you do something that makes people stronger in your community or even encourages arts and creativity or health, then that can become economic good. We made up GDP almost 100 years ago. During the Great Depression, a guy named Simon Kuznets invented it, and he said a few things that we all should take to heart. Number one, he said this is a terrible measurement for national well-being and we should not use it as that. Number two, he said we should include parenthood and motherhood. And number three, he said we should not include national defense spending because it adds no value. Of course, we ignored all of those things, and now we're riding GDP off a cliff. Because I have news for you all, GDP is gonna keep going up even as more and more Americans get left behind, and that's what we need to change. We need to start measuring what matters and reform the rules of the game so that we can win, build a human-centered economy, what I call a trickle-up economy, from human beings up, families up, and communities up. So I'm going to submit to you all, I'm here to edify you, inspire you, whatever. I'm here because I need your help to make this happen for you, for my kids, for your families, because this game is not going to work out in our favor. We're not going to be able to outrace the robot trucks. We're not going to be able to outthink artificial intelligence. I have friends in Silicon Valley who are now backing my campaign because they know this is real. They're what I call moral technologists. Unfortunately, it is not a majority of them. but there are enough. There are enough for us to save this country. So I'm going to leave you with a vision. We're heading towards one of these futures. There's a mindset of scarcity that is now sweeping our country. And then there's this mindset of abundance, of humanity, of cultivated benevolence. And we cannot get there without heroic effort and sacrifice and vision and leadership. And that is what I'd love for you all to provide in the days ahead. Thank you all very, very much.